fuck? Let's watch when Redditor solves crimes. Bro,
Reddit has long been home
what?
to various crime-solving communities, brimming with self-styled internet detectives. But more often than not, these online justice seekers create more problems than they actually solve, with their efforts often leading to innocent people being accused of crimes and lives
That guy was the Boston Bomber one, right? Was that the guy that got falsely accused of being the Boston Bomber?
being ruined. Their efforts often leading
Yeah, see? He committed suicide and he was wrongly accused of being the Boston Bomber.
to innocent
In
people
reality, he
being
just killed
accused of
himself. Harambe
crimes
got
and
more action
lives
than
being
me.
ruined by online witch hunts.
That's
But if you dig deep
crazy.
enough, you'll find that there are a few examples where a group of well-intentioned Redditors came together and provided key evidence to law enforcement that helped bring a criminal to justice or solve like a decades-old cold case. And we'll be looking at those rare occasions today. From Reddit finding the criminal responsible for a fatal hit and run, to them exposing an online artist for illegal
Oh, I
artwork,
remember that.
and them successfully solving a 25-year-old cold case, these are the times when Reddit detectives got it right.
I remember the chick that like did the illegal art on in the and people got so mad at her because she was doing
I
it
want to
like in like it was like preserved parks or whatever in like Arizona or some shit, and people were fucking pissed, and they like were like reported to park
thank
rangers and all
Helix
this
Sleep for
bullshit. I
sponsoring to
bought
fix
five.
sleep. Body medium to midnight
I bought
flat
five of
out
them.
of pain on luck and get. Our first story involves a police manhunt for the suspect behind a fatal hit and run incident.
I
Unable to
swear he covered. Sorry, I call that. I swear that he's the one that covered the girl that did the parks, like the graffiti artists in the parks. I swear he's the one that
find the
covered that.
perpetrator, the police turned to the internet for help, and Redditors picked up the slack. The story begins August 9th of 2018, just outside of Eatonville, Washington. Thanks to this area's natural beauty, the state routes and highways around these parts were popular with cyclists like Susan Rainwater. Susan was a local resident, and part of her morning routine was hopping on her bike and going for a ride down Highway 7. But unfortunately, Susan's August 9th outing would end in tragedy. In the
Damn.
early hours of the morning, while biking along this lonely road, a careless driver swerved onto the shoulder of the highway, striking Susan from behind at high speeds.
God
This
damn.
sent her and her bicycle careening off of the road, seriously injuring her in the process. Instead of stopping to render aid, the driver chose to shirk responsibility and fled the scene, continuing to
What?
drive down the highway as if nothing happened. With no one around to help her or provide medical aid, Susan Rainwater would pass away on the side of Highway 7,
Oh my
the
god.
victim of a fatal hit and run. Later that morning, confused as to why his wife hadn't returned home, her husband, 81-year-old Al Rainwater, goes out looking for her, only to find Susan's mangled blue bicycle on the side of the road. He immediately starts a search of the area and eventually finds the body of his deceased wife. Upon making this gruesome discovery, the distraught husband called law enforcement, who promptly arrived to investigate. Considering the scene they were presented with, it wouldn't take law enforcement long to come to the conclusion that
Hit and
Susan's
run.
cause of death was likely a hit and run. Their next step would be to track down the driver and bring this individual to justice. The only issue, though, is that there were no witnesses, thus nobody
Did you
to
watch it? No, I
identify
haven't
the
watched it
vehicle
yet.
responsible. In fact, the only clue left behind by the at-large
Remind me after
criminal
this video
was
and
a
we'll
chunk
watch
of
like
black plastic found at
Remind me after this video and we'll watch like bad drivers
the
and
crime
shit.
scene, presumably
I
knocked
don't want
off
to
the
watch near
perp's
death
vehicle
experience because that's kind of heavy, and like that
during the
could
bicycle
probably be
impact.
TOS.
This was all police had to go off of in regard to tracking down the driver responsible for killing Susan. And admittedly, it's not much to go off of. I mean, hell, any black vehicle could produce a chunk of plastic like this during a collision. For the time being, police had no real leads. So, stumped for the time being, one of the Washington state troopers on the scene would make an appeal to the internet for help, tweeting out the following. Troopers and detectives are still looking.
Also, there's this kid that would do streams and people would pay him to call the police while on someone, and the guy got shot because of him, and he got caught though. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that's called swatting. That's fucking very illegal and very dangerous. It's very fucking stupid and weird that people even take their time to do shit like that. It's fucking weird.
Looking for a black vehicle believed to be involved in this morning's tragic
Yeah, I guess
bicyclist
do whatever
fatality.
law.
If you know anything regarding this collision,
Yeah,
please
I'll
call
watch.
the Washington
I
State
might watch some
Patrol.
of it off
The
stream
trooper
though.
likely didn't realize it at the time, but this tweet would inadvertently spark a massive online investigation into this hit-and-run incident, with thousands of individuals meticulously examining this black chunk of plastic in an effort to solve the crime. And it all took place on Reddit, specifically r/whatisthisthing. This subreddit was a community dedicated to helping folks identify the origins of strange objects submitted by its own users. On the evening of August 9th, a user creates a thread showing the photo of the black vehicle chunk collected by the trooper. The post read, "Car part found in bicyclist hit-and-run fatality today."
I'm guessing that's something.
So naturally, this
some
post was
SUV.
like a call to arms to the users of the subreddit. Let's identify what vehicle, make, and model this black plastic piece came from so we can help police narrow down the search. This was their time to shine. I mean, it was exactly what the subreddit was born to do. Theories began pouring in. My guess would be an aftermarket bumper lip. I'm assuming it's from the front of the car. My guess is that it's the part of the bumper where the wiper for one of the headlights is located. Looks like it's from a window where the door's locking mechanism sticks out. Early guesses as to what the black chunk was varied, but eventually you saw multiple Redditors coming to the exact same keen observation. That curved notch in the plastic looks to me like a spot where you would insert a screwdriver through a grill or a headlamp bezel to adjust the aim of the headlamp. And when one looked up various photos of vehicle headlamp bezels online, there were many images featuring this curved notch mentioned by the previous Redditor. More so than any other vehicle part found on a car's front end, this
shit.
black chunk seemed like it came from a headlamp bezel. So Redditors had a pretty good idea of what the black plastic piece was. Their next step was to figure out what make and model this headlamp bezel came from. And this is a pretty tall order. I mean, seriously, you gotta think, there are dozens of different car brands on the road, each with countless models, years, aftermarket parts, etc. Even when you know the part is a headlamp bezel, finding the exact make and model match just seems impossible. But the thing is, you just can't discount Reddit's ability to have a random-ass expert on an extremely niche topic browsing the forums at any given time. As on this day, there just so happened to be an expert in headlamp bezels browsing the page. Meet Reddit user Jeff's Nuts. So Jeff, for his job, just so happened to be a headlamp inspector for the state of Maryland, making sure that vehicles were up to codes before reissuing registration. And about 2 hours after the initial Reddit thread was posted, Jeff stumbles across it and finds the black plastic piece in it looking oddly familiar. Jeff would chime into the thread explaining that he recognized the chunk as being part of a headlamp bezel specifically used for Chevy Silverado trucks produced in the mid-1980s, claiming he had done, quote, a shitload of headlamp checks, and recognized the semicircle as the place where he would insert a screwdriver to adjust headlamps on this particular model of trucks. He included a link to the auto parts website that showcased the bezel and concluded that the perpetrator was driving a Chevy Silverado-style pickup from the mid-80s. Jeff's write-up and expert testimony was the most compelling theory the thread had seen thus far. Convinced that Jeff had just solved the case, users of the Reddit forwarded his conclusion to the troopers on Twitter, informing them to be on the lookout for a mid-1980s Chevy pickup. After sending off Jeff's testimony, Redditors sat back and waited to see if his theory would prove useful. Days would pass with no updates, and it was beginning to look like Jeff's detective work was all for nothing. But finally, on August 14th, 5 days after the hit and run had taken place, a major breakthrough. The troopers who had been investigating the crime took to Twitter to post breaking news, not only revealing that the suspect had been arrested, but directly attributed the Reddit tip as being key to the arrest. The trooper wrote, WSP detectives made an arrest today for Thursday's fatal bicyclist hit and run in Eatonville. Reddit users identify a photographed broken car part as a mid-1980s Chevy truck headlight assembly. Local anonymous tip confirms and led to the arrest of a driver of a 1986 Chevy K10. The suspect's vehicle is attached, and as you can see, there's some damage to that right headlight bezel. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. Thanks to Jeff Nutt's headlamp inspection expertise, along with the local citizen that identified the mid-80s truck, Susan Rainwater's killer was now in police custody. The man behind the wheel of the Chevy K10 and responsible for the hit and run was 37-year-old Jeremy Simon. While under arrest, Simon allegedly told police that he fell asleep at the wheel and that when he hit Susan, he thought he had hit a deer or a mailbox. Though this story would later change, with Simon allegedly stating that he knew he hit somebody and didn't want to stop to help because he didn't want to see a dead body.
Bro, what? Did you link me something? It won't let you send me links, but I'm not.
Additionally,
It's all good.
heroin was found in Simon's possession
Of
during his
course.
arrest.
I literally was gonna say he seems like a fucking drug addict. That's why I literally was gonna say that before
Jeremy
I stopped
Simon
talking.
was charged with vehicular
Looks
homicide,
like a
hit and
fucking
run resulting
druggie.
in death, and unlawful possession of a controlled substance. He was later sentenced to serve
Yeah,
four
you
and
have
a
to
half
sub to
years on a
links and
drug
send
offender
links.
sentencing alternative, meaning half of his sentence was spent in prison and the other half out of prison on supervised probation.
That's
While I
fucking
personally
stupid.
feel as if his sentencing was a bit light,
I
I'm glad
agree.
that this man faced some semblance of justice.
True.
Without the assistance of Reddit, police likely would not have cracked this case as soon as they did, which could have possibly given Jeremy Simon enough time to cover his tracks and make his killing of Susan Rainwater untraceable. This case shows the power of numbers. A handful of small-town detectives never would have been able to match this ambiguous black chunk to the correct vehicle in any sort of reasonable amount of time. But when you bring the vast populace of Reddit into the equation, an expert is bound to stumble across the dilemma and
Idiots
provide the
in
niche
Cars,
know-how
number
needed to
33.
crack the
Okay.
case. So shout out to Jeff Nuts for doing exactly that. Members of the Rainwater family have reportedly reached out to the man behind the Jeff Nuts account personally, thanking him for his help in the case. In many ways, he is an internet hero.
Yeah, what a champion. The illegal artist. I remember this one. This one's
Our
fucking
next bit of
stupid.
successful Reddit sleuthing is actually a story I've covered on the channel
I told
in
you.
the past, but
Fucking called
I'd be
it.
kicking myself if I didn't mention it in this
Told
particular
you.
compilation, considering the theme and everything. It's the story of a renegade artist known for her stylized outdoor artwork.
It's
She
fine to only
seemed
watch the beginning of
innocuous
it though.
enough, but
Okay.
a Reddit
Put it in the
investigation
YouTube search
would
after
reveal
this.
that
Yeah, I will.
what appeared to be a harmless hobby was actually a legal
fucking
activity
told y'all.
taking place across multiple states.
See?
Back in 2013, a woman named Casey from New York would create a Tumblr page called Creepy Tings. It was the height of the Tumblr e-girl era,
Oh my
and Casey's
God.
page very much fit the status quo. Lots of angsty hipster imagery plastered on Creepy Tings Tumblr. Her bio read, "I'm an explorer of the human condition." An explorer indeed, as not long after creating this page, Casey would partake in a cross-country road trip across the United States. And on this road trip, she began updating her social media with photos from it, sharing her activities with the small group that followed her Tumblr and Instagram. Many of these photos showcase Casey's apparent talent. She was an artist, and admittedly not a half bad one. She shared a collection of outdoor paintings she had
That
created,
shit's
using
whack.
various rocks and boulders as her canvas. Each piece being accompanied by the Creepy Ting signature, presumably so those who stumbled across her work in nature could follow her. She built quite a
Please put a
portfolio
shirt
of these
on?
things. Casey's artistic forays seemed like an innocent endeavor. Hell, she was just a young woman traveling across the country expressing herself, right? What could possibly be wrong with painting on rocks? Well, potentially a lot, depending on what rocks we're talking here. And with that said, in October of
King me and Sean becoming
2013,
demons on keyboard.
Redditors would
Good
expose the
Wait, King, in
extremely
your seat? Yeah, in
questionable
your
nature
seats.
behind Casey's artwork. On October 21st, a
I
Redditor known as
think.
Yosemite 80 would create a thread on the Yosemite subreddit, a forum for
Good,
national
Ducky,
park
that's sick that you and
enthusiasts.
Sean
The
become
post
keyboard
read,
demons. Good
graffiti
shit.
artist with no regard for her actions leaves her
Tell
art
Sean
on
I
the
said
Vernal
hi.
Falls stock trail. This post was an expose alleging that Creepy Tings had actually been doing her artwork in protected national
See?
parks, which would be park vandalism
I'm about to
and
be
a federal
rich. Hell
crime.
yeah.
And not only that, to make things worse, she was doing them on rocks in areas that were cherished by park visitors
said,
for
"What's
their
up?"
untouched beauty.
Hell yeah.
Yosemite 80 continues. You can see her art on the stock trail that connects the Mist Trail to the JMT Trail, a little ways past the Vernal Falls footbridge and bathrooms. You can find other things she's defaced via her social media outlets where she states, quote, "I know I'm a bad person." Yosemite 80 then makes a call for justice. I wonder if it's possible to get some sort of action against this person. Her name on Instagram shows her Facebook page as well, so she's not that hard to
Song
find.
plays
It's a
PC.
pretty scumbag move to mess with the national parks, and members of this subreddit had a visceral reaction to the alleged Casey vandalism. She should be banned from all national parks at the very least. She should be banned from painting as well. Good lord, her art sucks. As a wilderness education park ranger, this makes me very sad. Apparently I'm not doing my job properly. One Redditor chimes in with an observation stating that after digging through Casey's photos, they were confident that she had defaced numerous parks, including Yosemite, Death Valley, Joshua Tree, the Canyonlands, and Zion.
That's
so if true,
crazy.
Creepy Tings Casey had committed some multi-state vandalism here. Reddit had put Casey on notice, and unfortunately for her, there was a national park agent that often perused this subreddit who had stumbled across this little piece of information. This is a post from Special Agent Steve Yu. Hi, my name is Steve Yu, and I'm an investigator in Yosemite National Park. Thanks so much for bringing this to our attention. I'm not sure about the best way to go about this, as it's my first case I've worked off of Reddit, but if folks can send me what they've grabbed to my email, that would be great. So naturally, Redditors started funneling all potentially incriminating photos to Steve Yu's email. They also managed to follow her social media trail back to Facebook, which revealed her real name, and that was also passed over as well. They were trying to get this woman locked up. Now, for anyone out there that thought this Agent Steve Yu was just some impersonator blowing smoke up their asses, time would show that park rangers really were looking into the Creepy Ting situation. As about 24 hours after the story went viral on Reddit, the National Park Service announced the following. The National Park Service is investigating reports of vandalism at least 10 national parks in Arizona, California, Colorado, Oregon, and Utah. While we can't discuss details of a case under investigation, we take the issue of vandalism seriously. National parks exist to preserve and protect our nation's natural, cultural, and historic heritage for both current and future generations. Vandalism is a violation of the law, and it also damages and sometimes destroys irreplaceable treasures that belong to all Americans. There are forums for artistic expression in national parks because national parks inspire artistic creativity. These images are outside of that forum and outside the law. So yeah, the National Park Rangers were hot on the heels of Creepy Ting's Casey, and it appeared she knew that the walls were closing in. As not long after the official statement from the Park Service, Casey's Tumblr and Instagram page were taken down. This was perceived by many as her trying to cover her tracks and avoid legal punishment for her actions. But in fact, the opposite was true, as thanks to the heat provided by Reddit, Casey actually turned herself in to authorities. Days after the initial bulletin, the Park Service would reveal that Creepy Ting's Casey was identified as the suspect for the park vandalism at hand. They also announced that they were consulting with the U.S. Attorney's Office in regard to potential charges. It was case closed, and Reddit had successfully exposed Tumblr artist Creepy Ting's Casey for vandalizing national parks. Casey's fate wouldn't be revealed until June of 2016. It turns out that she pled guilty to 7 misdemeanor counts of damaging government property. She was sentenced to serve 2 years of probation and 200 hours of community service. Additionally, while on probation, Casey was banned from lands administered by the National Park Service, U.S. Forestry Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and the Army Corps of Engineers.
Oh man, not the Bureau of Land Management. They're not to be fucked with.
If you combine all of this government-managed land together, that Casey was technically banned from about 20% of the land in the United States during this 2-year probationary period. Some may consider Reddit's obsessive investigation into this case a little bit petty, but national parks are important, and it's not okay for people to be defacing them with their artwork. Sure, you could argue that Casey was ignorant in this matter, but still, I think in the age of social media and social media influencers, it was important to sort of make an example and put a spotlight on this case and what this girl was doing. Because who knows, maybe if you didn't really crack down on it, you'd have people fucking spray painting the Grand Canyon walls and trying to get clout off of it. So for any of you would-be park vandalists out there, tread lightly, as all it takes is one Reddit thread and you too could find yourself in serious legal trouble.
This is the last one. Yeah, it's the last one.
Our next story involves a Redditor spreading awareness of a missing persons cold case from the 1990s. Their interest in the case inadvertently sets off a series of events that leads to it being resolved and the family getting closure after decades of confusion. This story begins 27 years ago on June 26th of 1995 in Virginia. Around 1:30 p.m., Greensville County Police respond to reports of a car wreck along U.S. Route 58 just outside of the town of Emporia. When police arrive, they find a smashed-up Volkswagen van that had driven off the road and violently collided with trees bordering the highway.
Damn.
Inside, they find 2 young men, both deceased. Curiously, both men were wearing tie-dyed shirts with logos from the Grateful Dead. The famed American rock group had performed the day prior at Robert F. Kennedy Stadium in Washington, D.C. Upon further investigation of the bodies, scalped tickets were found in the pockets of the vehicle's passenger.
Damn.
So it looked like those 2 individuals were returning from that Grateful Dead
Probably
concert in D.C. No drugs were found in the vehicle, and police came to the conclusion that the wreck was likely caused by the driver simply falling asleep at the wheel due to exhaustion. The vehicle's driver would later be identified as 21-year-old Michael E. Hagar, thanks to a
Damn, he was
state-issued
my
ID
age.
found on his person. Police say that Hagar's passenger was a hitchhiker that had been picked up somewhere between Fairfax and Gloucester, Virginia.
Oh,
The theory
shit.
being that the two individuals either met at the concert or met slightly after while on the road and became friends because of their obvious sort of love for the Grateful Dead, considering their clothing. After a thorough crash scene investigation, authorities ultimately determined that there was no foul play in regard to the death of these two individuals and the car wreck that caused it. But that wasn't case closed. See, there's an element to this case that has made it infamous over the years, that element being the mysterious identity of Michael Hagar's apparent hitchhiking passenger. Authorities were never able to identify who this person was. The individual didn't have a state-issue ID on them, their face was heavily lacerated during the car crash, Michael Hagar's family didn't know who it was, and the person didn't have fingerprints that were in any sort of national database. The only real clue regarding the name of this individual came in the form of a handwritten note found at the crash site. The note read, "Jason, sorry we had to go. See you around. Call me at redacted number at Caroline T and Carolyn O." So this note actually suggested that the person's name may have been Jason, but the number never led to anyone, nor were the individuals who wrote it ever identified. For all intents and purposes,
Well, there's a phone
this
number.
individual would become what's known as a John Doe, an unidentified individual. And considering the clothing he wore, the term Grateful Doe became a popular name for the unidentified person in this case. With no family or evidence coming forward, the Grateful Doe case went cold and was forgotten about for years, with the Doe just simply fading away as this unidentified lost soul. But that would change in 2012. Due to the serious nature of the Grateful Doe's facial injuries, photos of his face weren't released at the time of the car crash. However, in 2012, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children managed to digitally render a facial reconstruction of the Grateful Doe, giving a face to the nameless victim for the first time.
Damn.
With the face now attached to the mystery, online web sleuths became attracted to it and banded together on sites like Facebook in an effort to possibly match an identity with this unidentified Doe. Eventually, the hunt for the Grateful Doe's identity would spread to Reddit, which brings us to Reddit user Zombie Gray, aka Gray Metal. Gray had become interested in cracking the Grateful Doe case practically since the release of the 2012 photo, and they often took time out of their days scouring through what little clues were available trying to find a match. Gray was also a founding member of the r/Grateful Doe subreddit, a place dedicated to identifying the Doe. With so little to go off of in this case, Gray came to the conclusion that it wouldn't be something one person could solve alone. The only way to get this thing solved was if they put the face of the Doe on as many screens as possible in the hopes that somebody from the 1990s recognized this individual and would come forward with information regarding their identity. Skilled in the art of viral Redditry, Gray gets the idea to compose this rather compelling Imgur post. It's a missing poster of sorts, which compiles the face of the Doe along with their clothing and other identifying elements found at the crash site. Accompanying it was a humble request to all who encountered the face of the Grateful Doe. Can you help give him back his name? Gray's missing poster went live in early 2015, and it almost immediately went viral due to its compelling nature. The internet loves a good challenge, and solving the mystery of the Grateful Doe's identity was priority number one for online detectives. With Gray's missing poster about the Grateful Doe virally spreading, all that was needed was for someone who knew the Grateful Doe back in 1995 to stumble across the post and come forward with information. So basically, you needed an internet miracle. It really was a needle in a haystack situation here. But you know the drill here. Reddit seems to defy all odds when it comes to this kind of stuff. Sometime after the Grateful Doe missing poster had gone viral, a man going by the name of Steve sends a private message to Gray on Reddit. Steve would go on to explain that not only did he recognize the Grateful Doe, but he was fairly sure that this individual was one of his old roommates while living in Illinois named Jason Callahan. Steve's testimony corroborated the note found at the crash site, which suggested that the Doe's name was Jason. Steve's anecdote was definitely worth investigating further, so the internet went on a collective manhunt trying to find anyone potentially related to someone named Jason Callahan. But due to the inescapably viral nature of this story, not much of a hunt was needed, as reported Jason Callahan family members began revealing themselves in due time. In January of 2015, a woman named Margaretta Evans would post the following in response to one of Gray's Grateful Doe missing posters on Facebook. Oh my god, this is my son Jason Callahan from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I've been looking for him all this time with no luck. Today my other son saw this Facebook page, and after all these years of praying for him just to call me or come home, please inbox a message or phone number to contact me. Evans would go on to explain that her son left home after becoming an adult to partake in a free-spirited lifestyle, essentially traveling around the country and attending various music shows and festivals, specifically Grateful Dead concerts. The last time she claimed to have saw him was in 1995. A missing persons report wasn't filed at the time, and this was likely foregone for several reasons. First off, this was a grown man who left the house on his own accord. Secondly, she didn't know what jurisdiction to file it in if she wanted to. And thirdly, it just didn't really seem like Jason wanted to be home, if you know what I'm saying. So in lieu of discovering this story and the photos of the young man she believes to be her lost son, the Grateful Doe's apparent mother files a police report, and a new investigation is open. Investigators then requested a family member to submit DNA samples for comparison, as this would be the best way to prove without a shadow of a doubt that the Grateful Doe was in fact Jason Callahan, as they still had his DNA on file. This is when Shannon Michelson, the Grateful Doe's apparent half-sister, comes forward, eager to submit her DNA in an effort to solve the mystery. She told a Boston radio station, quote, "When I looked at that picture, it looked like my dad was looking back at me. He had the same face, and he even had a lot of my facial features. My forehead and the shape of my face, I knew in that moment deep down, that was Jason." Shannon would submit her DNA for testing in early 2015. In the meantime, Gray and the other online sleuths who had dedicated their time to solving this case were on the edge of their seats. It was the closest anyone had come to identifying the Grateful Doe since the day of that car accident in 1995. Finally, after a year of waiting, in late 2015, DNA results came in, and it was a match.
Wow.
Shannon Michelson was indeed related to the Grateful Doe. This meant that the Grateful Doe was indeed 19-year-old Jason Callahan from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Oh my God.
One of the most famous Doe cases in history had been solved thanks to the internet, and more specifically, the awareness granted to the Grateful Doe case by Gray.
Crazy.
It was a bittersweet moment as Jason Callahan's family had thought he was alive this entire time, thinking perhaps he had just decided to spend his life living elsewhere in the United States and didn't want to come home. The realization that he was gone was indeed saddening, but at least they had some sort of closure, an answer as to what became of young Jason. This story is a fascinating example of the internet's ability simply to raise awareness about an issue. I particularly like this example in regard to Reddit's armchair investigations because it doesn't involve Redditors prying into someone's personal life or participating in roughshod investigative journalism to solve a mystery. With the viral missing poster, Gray and the r/Grateful Doe community simply made a decades-old story accessible to the vast internet populace, putting the ball in motion that eventually led to the right people becoming aware of the Grateful Doe and the family finally putting to rest the decades-old mystery.
That's fucking
And with
crazy.
that, those were the cases where Reddit detectives actually got it right and did some good in the world, unlike the many instances where they've screwed up majorly. Let me know what you
fucking instances where they fucked up. Thanks for the video, man. Okay.